I'm Doug Cutler, and I'm the Putnam Town Administrator. And today I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Town of Putnam and American Legion Post 13 to this Remembrance ceremony on the 15th anniversary of 9/11. Today, Putnam joins with ceremonies in New York City, in Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon, and communities throughout the United States to honor and pay respects to those victims who died on 9/11. So we proceed today in terms of our own respect, and we have this ceremony today which will pay respects and bring our thoughts to those that families and members throughout the United States on the occasion of the 15th anniversary of 9/11. With that, one housekeeping thing, please turn off any cell phones or put them on mute if you have that opportunity. And I'd also like to introduce our members of our Board of Selectmen who are in attendance today. So if you would please rise and give them some recognition. We have Roy Simmons, Doug Cutler Jr., Owen Tarr, and Scott Franklin. There's a little change in the order of the program. On presentation of the colors, you'll rise, but we'll also at the same time after present arms, Mo Kader will come up and sing the national anthem while the American Legion Color Guard is at present arms. So with that, we'll have the presentation of colors from the American Legion Post 13 Color Guard.
Right? Hey! Ready? Pose. Recover. Present. Home.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay, you may be seated. Thank you, Mo, for that spirited rendition of the national anthem. Now my pleasure for the invocation to introduce Reverend Jonathan Scott, who is a chaplain at the Day Kimball Hospital for more than 16 years, and he's been providing pastoral care to patients at the hospital and to their families. Reverend Scott.
Let us pray.
pray. Gracious God, you who seek us, who call us by name, and have led us by different paths to join together this afternoon, we gather as fellow citizens to remember. We remember the events of 15 years ago, the attacks, the dismay, the sacrifices, the desire to help heal the wounds, the rededication to be a nation that is a light set upon the hill. We want to be a beacon that promises safe haven for the weary, peace for the afflicted, healing for the wounded, freedom for the oppressed, and an opportunity for all to pursue lives of meaning, productivity, and joy. Help us to accomplish these our goals. Amen.
Amen.
It's now my honor to introduce the Honorable Tony Falzarano, Mayor of the town of Putnam, and he will be greetings from the town of Putnam. Mayor Falzarano.
Good afternoon all, and welcome. On behalf of Putnam, on behalf of the selectmen that are here, and the two who couldn't make it, we wish you a very, very warm welcome to the ceremony. When Ron Kadir asked Doug Cutler and myself if we would be willing to join in this with the VFW, we jumped at the opportunity because, like all things in our country, as time goes on, we kind of forget. And when I drove in, I saw all those cars. I said, holy Christmas, they're parked on the end of the street. I didn't know there was a football game going on. But there's a very healthy crowd today. I'm glad a lot of people came. Now, 15 years ago, what were you doing? I can remember what I was doing. I taught a class, first period, and it's called Contemporary Affairs. You who are my age knew it as current events. And we had a big television. It took us years to get one. But I would force the kids, juniors and seniors, to watch the news the last 10 minutes of the class. So we're watching the news, and all of a sudden, one kid looks, oh, that's going to be a new play. That's going to be a new movie. I go, no, that's ABC News. That's really happening right now. And when they saw the destruction, and they saw what happened, shock came over. The bell rang. It was supposed to go to the second period. They wouldn't move. They were glued to that TV. And it was at exactly 8:46 a.m. Period changed at 8:50. So for those 4 minutes, and they stayed in my room, no one moved. Everyone was frozen. Unfortunately, 2,977 innocent people died, along with 300 firefighters and over 20 policemen on that day. Shortly after that, at 9:03, the second plane landed into the Pentagon. And we were just amazed. And I didn't know, you all have kids. What do you tell high school kids? This is real, this is happening. So it was a real shock. And I said, you can never forget this. 184 people died. And there were brave people on Flight 93 who fought the terrorists in the plane and they landed in some field. But it's interesting that when I see kids today, they haven't forgotten. I can remember I wasn't even born when Pearl Harbor was attacked, but my father drilled it in my head, and every teacher had in socialists drilled it the day Pearl Harbor got attacked. So I hope that you keep remembering this and think about the people, the kids, the firefighters, the first responders who died. It was a terrible event and one that I'll never forget. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your dedication, and thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor Falzarano. Representing the American Legion Post 13 today is their adjutant, Roger Franklin. One of the people that spearheaded this ceremony today, this event, is Ron Kader, who is the current commandant of the American Legion Post here in Putnam. And unfortunately, Ron was unable to make it. He had travel plans, and he's actually in France, I believe, and he's going to be visiting some of the cemeteries, the beaches of Normandy while he's over in France. But he wanted me to bring his greetings and to say how sorry he was that he couldn't be here today. He was really a part of the driving force behind the ceremony, so I just want to thank him for and recognize him for his effort in terms of putting this event together. And with that, I'd like to bring up Roger Franklin, who will bring greetings from American Legion Post 13, and he serves as their adjutant. Roger.
Senator Flexer, Representative Rivera, Mayor Falzarano, Town Administrator Cutler, other members of the dais, my fellow members of American Legion, Mayor Post 13, friends, and patriotic community members. On behalf of Mayor American Legion Post 13, welcome to this 15th anniversary of 9/11 Remembrance program. Post 13 and the town of Putnam have worked together to bring about this program of remembrance. Thank you to Mayor Falzarano and Town Administrator Cutler for their assistance and cooperation in making this event a reality. Many of us can't remember what we were doing 2 weeks ago or even just a few days ago, but I am certain that we remember what we were doing on Tuesday morning, September 11th, 2001, when our world changed forever with a loss of life and the devastation that came about on that day. The impact that fateful day had on all of us will never be forgotten and never should be forgotten. When the events of that day unfolded, I was on a flight from Athens, Greece to Frankfurt, Germany. Upon landing in Frankfurt, we were ushered to a waiting area where armed German soldiers stood guard. That was a spooky experience. After several hours, we were bused from the terminal to several locations throughout Germany, not knowing the extent of the event which took place in our home country. I and 19 others ended up in Wiesbaden, where we would stay until late on Friday, when we were bused back to Frankfurt and eventually flown back to the United States. Upon landing, the passengers and crew cheered and applauded, some too overcome by emotion, knowing that we were back in country on American soil. So let us join together this afternoon to appropriately remember and never forget. God bless America. Thank you.
At this time, I'm going off script a little bit, but I think it would be entirely appropriate if members of the American Legion Post, any American Legion Post, particularly the one in Putnam, and also veterans of foreign war would stand up and be recognized, please. Thank you for your service. Now we are going to have presentation and remarks from our delegation from the state legislature. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce them together, but in order of seniority, first Senator May Flexer, our senator representing this area, and also our state representative, Danny Rivera, who we know a lot from his years as mayor of the town of Putnam. So with that, I'd like to bring Senator Flexer and Representative Rivera up for a presentation and also remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank everyone who came out today for this day. It's hard to forget. I can remember very well when it happened. We had just got a TV in the town hall, and I happened to have it on, and I was walking from my office to the, what they call the selectmen's chambers, and I think it was CNN, started showing the pictures of the plane hitting. And I quickly went back to my office and called my wife and said, quickly turn on the TV. She said, what's the matter? I said, what are you doing? So I'm vacuuming. I said, turn on the TV. I jumped in my car, went home, and the two of us sat down and watched it for hours. And to this day, I can still remember the scenes. And the funny thing about it is, and to show you how shook all of us were, and I'm sure just like I was, about 3 hours later when I went back to go to my car and come back to the town hall, my car was still running. I drove home, threw it in park, jumped out of the car, and went in the house to watch it with my wife. And 3 hours later, my car was still running. It's a day I don't think we'll ever forget. But I gotta say this about the United States of America. We didn't fall apart. We came back maybe even stronger than before. And let it never be said that we're not a country of the best people in this world. Thank you very much. Looking up to our senator, as you can see, I'm going to leave all the heavy hitting to her. She's going to read the proclamation, and she has a few other items she's going to read to you. And thank you very much again.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you today, and I really want to thank the town of Putnam and the American Legion Post 13 for having this ceremony today. Today is a day where, as Americans, we always just want to come together and take time to remember what happened today, to ensure that we never forget, to make sure we can move on together as a country in love and hope. I was thinking about what I was going to say today, and luckily I didn't have to put too much thought into it because my dad called a couple days ago and said, I heard you're going to speak at this ceremony. I got this thing I wrote. Maybe you can read it. So I'm going to share with you some words my father wrote a week after September 11th, 2001. And I will say, though, while my dad is a proud lover of Northeastern Connecticut, my mother and father were New Yorkers for several decades in their lives, and so I think this has special meaning. Written by my dad, Chaplain Howard Flexer. As I sat there with a good part of the country, watching the second airliner hit the South Tower, my first thought was of those in both the airliners and the buildings. My second thought was this was just like those planes that had our ships in World War II, only on a grander scale than anyone could have thought of. No words can even try to express the effects it has had on us as a country. Gone is the feeling of being somewhat safe on our own soil. That phrase, "not in my backyard," will never apply here again. We as a country are bouncing back. We have shown the world what we as Americans are made of. We have rushed to the rescue of those we can help. We stood in line for hours to give blood. We handed out sneakers to those who had to walk up Manhattan in high heels, gave out food and drink as they passed our stores. All over the country, we are giving food, supplies, money, and manpower to that rescue. Most of all, we are giving our prayers. We are coming to grips with the fact that being happy with what you have is very important. Those who lost loved ones, friends, fellow workers, or people they just saw yesterday that know that well now. Our hearts go out to them. We are Americans, and there is no finer way to group us than into that one word that is just being called Americans. Those Twin Towers were just one symbol of our great country, but we have many, and none greater than our country's people. We are Americans. We will go on. We will be stronger. And we will rid the world of those who were so filled with hate to do this to us. We will be a beacon of love and hope. God bless the United States of America. now I'd like to invite Roger Franklin and Mayor Falzarano to come forward. Representative Rivero and I each have an official citation from the Connecticut General Assembly to present to you. It's introduced by myself and Representative Daniel S. Rivero. Be it hereby known to all that the Connecticut General Assembly hereby offers its sincerest congratulations to May of Dean's American Legion Post number 13 and the town of Putnam. In recognition of your annual commemoration of the events of September 11th, 2001, we are grateful to our veterans and town officials for continuing this important and solemn tradition so that we may never forget the events of that tragic day, the Americans we lost, and the first responders who sacrificed their lives. The entire membership extends its very best wishes on this memorable occasion and expresses the hope for continued success. Given this, the 11th day of September, 2016.
Thank you, Senator Flexer and Representative Rivero, for those kind words and inspirational words. We come to the point in the program now where we have our featured speaker. Many of you know Dee. She's been a resident, born here in Putnam, and is a native of this area. But one thing that is unique about Dee Carnahan is that she left Putnam to go to work in Washington, D.C., and more particularly at the Pentagon. And she worked her way up through the ranks at the Pentagon to finally where she worked in the office of the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, which is a 4-star admiral position. And she was serving there for many years. And unfortunately, she was also there on 9/11. She was working in the Pentagon in the office of the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, which was in this very close to the vicinity of where that plane hit the Pentagon on 9/11. So she's very familiar and has a great perspective on what happened on 9/11, and I think it's most appropriate that she come here today to speak and be the featured speaker and present what she went through on that particular day. So please, I'm honored to present Dee Carnahan, our featured speaker.
I'm going to go off script for a second here, but everybody that spoke so far has had me choked up. So this has been very emotional. But I'm going to be reading my remarks, but I'm going to be also addressing you all while I'm doing it. So because there's a lot to cover here. So I'll begin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dee Carnahan, and I'm honored to be here with you today to commemorate 15 years that have passed since our country was attacked and changed forever. We must never forget those brave but innocent victims we lost that day in the World Trade Centers, the Pentagon, and on the airplane in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I was at work in the Pentagon on that day, and the events that took place that morning and the days following are still prominent in my mind. If you'll allow me a few minutes to tell you how I came to be there, you'll understand why I'm up here talking to you today. I left Putnam in January 1970 at the age of 23 and headed to Arlington, Virginia, where I had a job waiting for me, working at the Pentagon in the Department of the Navy. I knew no one there, but I was going to give it a whirl and stay at least 6 months. Little did I realize back then that I would still be there until April 26, 2002, when I retired with 32 years and 3 months of service. I literally grew up in the Pentagon, and except for 9/11, I loved every day of it. That fateful day started out like any other day of mine. I usually was on the highway by 6:30 a.m., and that day was no exception. The weather was stunning with not a cloud in the sky. Traffic was crazy, as it normally was, but I arrived in the south parking lot at 7 a.m. and got a great parking place right next to the building. In those parking areas, timing was everything. Back then, my cell phone was not attached to my hand, so it stayed locked in my car while I went into the building to spend 8 or more hours at my desk. I had been there 31 years and 9 months already and never felt the least bit nervous about my or anyone else's safety. It wasn't affectionately called the five-sided foxhole for nothing. In 1970, my career with the Navy started in the exact area where the plane hit the building that day. There were about 28,000 military and civilians working there when I first started. I was in that area until 1975, and over the years that followed, I had climbed up the ranks in the civilian community, finally making it to the E-Ring in 1983, working for the Assistant Vice Chief of Naval Operations, a 2-star admiral. In August 1989, I was promoted into the office of the Vice Chief of Naval Operations, the VC&O, working as protocol officer and scheduler for the number 2 military man in the Navy, a 4-star admiral. On 9/11, my 8th VC&O was Admiral Bill Fox Fallon, an aviator, who had taken over the job in October of 2000, the day before the USS Cole was blown up in Yemen by terrorists. It was his indoctrination and a foreshadowing of things yet to come. We were in temporary spaces on the 4th floor, E-Ring, 6th corridor, about a football field away from where the plane hit. Our spaces in the new wedge were still under construction, and we were to be moving there in a month or so, along with many others. Some of my Navy friends and colleagues had already moved into their new spaces just a few weeks prior to 9/11. The Vice Chief was in a meeting with the Chief of Naval Operations, the CNO, when the first plane hit the World Trade Center. It was just the Deputy Executive to the Vice Chief, Commander Dave Roddy, and me in the office, as the rest of my guys were out at meetings or running errands. The TV in the office was on CNN, but muted. I was on the phone calling my counterparts in the other services to find out when their bosses' Christmas parties were going to be in December. It was called long-range planning. God forbid that 2 4-stars have their Christmas party on the same Saturday evening. Life was simpler then, or so it seems now. When Commander Roddy realized that a plane had hit the first building in New York, he put the volume up on the TV to see what had happened. Like most of us, we thought it had to be an accident. He and I started to watch the coverage when the second plane hit the other building. In that moment, everything changed. By now, Captain Doug Crowder, the executive assistant to the Vice Chief, had returned to his desk and was greeted by Commander Roddy with the news of the attacks in New York. The others were also returning to the office and were unaware of things in New York until we told them. I was the only civilian with an entire staff of Navy men who immediately went into war mode, and that is the first time I was ever frightened at work. They were on phones talking with the Navy Command Center, personnel who had just moved a month before to their new spaces, which soon became ground zero. They were assessing the situation in New York should something like that ever happen to us in the Pentagon. I asked the captain what was going on, and he called it terrorism. I had no idea what he was talking about. He said in plain English, "We are being attacked." Things were popping in the office by then. The boss was still with the C&O in his office when the news was broken to them about New York, so they remained there to work on that issue. At about 9:30 a.m., I could still see airplanes flying past our windows, going into Reagan National Airport. I asked the captain if that could ever happen at the Pentagon. He said no. Less than 10 minutes later, I thought a bomb had been dropped on the building, but was told that a plane had hit us and that we had to evacuate right away. That's when the chaos began. Everyone was coming out of their offices in the E-ring into the hallway. Panic in people's voices, worrying and wondering about all of our co-workers and friends who had recently moved to the new wedge and what their status was. I was ordered by the captain to leave the building. One of the things that stays with me to this day was that my boss, the vice chief, was just arriving at the door to our spaces. And there were military and civilian alike milling about in the hallway, not sure what had happened or what to do next. I distinctly remember the vice chief telling two young sailors to get me out of the building right away. They stood at attention, saluted him. He returned the salute, and each young man put his hand on my arms. The next thing I knew was that they were ensuring I got out of the building safely. To this day, I still get emotional about that gesture. At this point, we didn't have a clue of how bad the situation really was and how vast the damage was to that area of the building. By then, many people in the 6th corridor of each floor were trying to figure out which way to get out of the building. I knew I was in shock and found myself scared, hyperventilating, and worried about my friends who had just moved into their new spaces where the plane had hit. I had no idea who was dead, injured, or had escaped in time. I later found out that they were worried about me being alive as well. We ended up going out the river entrance of the building, where people were still at their desks doing work, unaware that a plane had hit us. As soon as we could get far enough away, we stopped to see what was going on the other side of the building. All we could see was the black